I think it's interesting how the museum has shifted a little bit from being the holder of knowledge to being a facilitator and facilitating dialogue between science and citizens rather than producing and holding the knowledge.
It's, in a way, that started some time ago. The curator was always the authority, but for the last 10, 15 years, we've known that curators really are more like knowledge brokers. We understood that the knowledge that was associated with certain collections that we had really belonged with the community that was involved with those collections before they came to the museum. We might have a story that we had in relation to a particular collection, but we had to acknowledge that the people who owned it before us or used it before us had their own take on it, and in a way we became knowledge brokers.
So we are hoping to present these not in a way that will frighten people away from the issue, but will draw them in, get them enticed into it because of all the interesting objects we've got, the interesting animals, the birds, the mammals, the interesting frogs that we can show through these environments. So we can use exhibits to draw people in and get them excited about the subject, and then present them the issues and the information about the problems.
This, though, is more social history. It's a really important, relevant social history. It's got lots of subtle lessons about a slightly more accidentally conservationist, if you like, society, and how all the processes that have enabled us to forget to conserve. How do you represent that in a museum? Not in a biodiversity show, and not directly in a climate change. There's got to be an adapted social sciences, social history.
Well, we do have a big gallery upstairs, Melbourne Story, which features the history of Melbourne and also has environmental and sustainability themes running through it as well. So, I mean, we can show it both in a social history and in a scientific context within a museum.
And do you try to have linkages or connections between for instance, the biodiversity and climate change and the social history exhibition to try to draw these connections that says, well, yes, a consumer society and how it's changed then has impacts or implications on, if you like, the environment and biodiversity and things like that.
We tend to like to have a message subtly repeated, so that it's not, necessarily linking every gallery to every other gallery, but certainly themes like Indigenous culture go through all the galleries, and sustainability more and more is being embedded in all the messages that we're putting out.
Just generally, we're talking about the kind of disconnect between this exhibit and the other, and that's a general problem with this whole thing, isn't it? There's no storyline linking exhibits. So
there is a storyline linking exhibits, but it's not climate change and it's not energy.
It's skyscrapers.
It's skyscrapers.
Yeah, so it's...
But that's the generic story. That's the story.
Well,
you come in with the door and
I mean, these if you go to the entrance somewhere, we talk about that there are 4 areas that, at the very entrance to the exhibit, we talk about 4 areas.
Yes.
And so the area we see here, whether it's about what's the energy about skyscrapers when they operate, what is the psychology that goes on while people are in a small box called an elevator, and how they move around while they're in elevators, and how we avoid eye contact.
They usually don't move around.
Well, they do as people leave and enter. What's it like to live in a skyscraper? So this area is about the context of living in a skyscraper. There's an area back here about the construction, an area about the architecture and engineering, and then an introductory area. So there are messages embedded in here, and there are some key stories. Obviously, if you were to go through this every exhibit, one of the recurrent things, whether it's here, whether it's the exhibit you saw before, whether you go to the green roof exhibit that's upstairs, the idea of energy does get reiterated over and over again, that skyscrapers use energy and they're used in building them, constructing them, and operating them.
We then go on to actually talk about sea level rises in Sydney, and this is one of our very popular exhibits here. What you can do is you can look at a map of the Sydney area, and you can increase how the coastal areas change and how the city is gradually inundated with water. And this really brings home to people.
There's my house.
Yes, and that's what people say. People play with this, and they look for the point at which their own house or their own neighbourhood goes underwater. Increasingly, we're finding that we're being asked to produce evidence of impact, and so quite a lot of the work that we're doing is also about looking at those sorts of issues.
So do you find your audience that comes here are people that are, you know, reasonably well aware of the environment anyway, or do you get people that you feel like you bring a big change to them by looking at these things?
I think it's a mixture. There's always historically, most museums and galleries will find that there's a bias in their audience in terms of people who self-select to visit museums and galleries towards people who are more affluent, more highly educated, more likely to be interested in informal learning experiences. But much further than that, no, I wouldn't say that people who come here feel that they know a great deal about these sorts of issues.
Would you try in this new climate change biodiversity exhibit, as you said, to reflect the climate change skeptics' opinions, or will you try to reflect what I think you just described as the best available science information that you know, state of the art in terms of current science?
We'll go with the best available science we have, but we won't make it necessarily too threatening. It'll be something that'll be, as I said, subtle and pervasive, with follow-up information available on our websites and information sheets.
It's run off a simple computer. It's what we would call a bespoke exhibit. So we needed to work with the experts who actually had this data. And what we then needed to do is create an interface, so in this case a touchscreen interface, which really radically simplifies what it is that you do, because any level of research like this will be so much more complicated than people will be able to interact with. And so the cost really, the hardware cost is relatively small, because these things are now, they're now so cheap that most point of sale in a shop uses a touch screen, and people use them in airports and all over the place. The technology is now industry standard. The expense is in the software development to create this particular program. But even that probably, I haven't got the exact cost for this, but I'd be surprised if we spent more than, say, $20,000 on this exhibit, which over the lifetime of an exhibition like this is not hugely expensive. One of the issues is although it seems like a lot of effort, it always seems to make sense to create an exhibit like this specifically for this exhibition, because that way you can test how your audience actually will use it. And you need to do that sort of user testing to actually make sure that it will work well, because often a good idea actually won't translate well to an exhibition context.
Because you could have, for instance, like how the sea warming 2 degrees will cause the sea urchins to move up the coast. I mean, they are already, and destroy the lobsters. And
I've seen exhibits at the New England Aquarium. They did one actually not about sea urchins but about jellyfish, where they looked at how the life cycle of the jellyfish and the earlier breeding was actually disrupting the fish stocks and disrupting lobsters. Similar sort of idea.
So I think that sort of thing would be really good.
To me, it's I'd be wanting something a little bit bigger. I mean, it's just so important, the message, and some of the things you were telling us aren't here. So you've got an actual stromatolite, and well, you've got a couple of them.